Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Welcome to Lady Khadija. May God be pleased with her. Radiallahu anha. Online college. Today is the first lesson of a new year for A-level maths. So today we are starting A-level maths year 1. We'll be following the Edexcel syllabus, and we'll also be trying to cover the IAL syllabus where there are some extra bits. So if it's an extra bit that only applies to IAL, then I'll let you know at the beginning of the video. Otherwise, you can assume that every video is included in both Edexcel and IAL. So today's topic is called simplifying algebra. It's just building on, revising really what you've done at GCSE already. So it should be quite comfortable as long as your GCSE knowledge is strong. So let's begin. First question is simplify the following. So the question is, or the expression is x squared times x to the power 3. Let's make it x to the power 5. So hopefully you remember the principle here, which is that when we're multiplying and the base is the same, so x is called the base, and if that's the case, then we can just add the powers. So we have x to the power 7. And if you want to think about that a bit more deeply, then remember x squared really means x times x. And then x to the power 5 means x times x times x times x 5 times. So if you were to write all of this out, then you'd end up with x being times by x, being times by x, being times by x. All together you'd have 2 here and then another 5 here. So altogether 7 times, which you might as well write as x to the power 7. So there is some logic in it. Don't just try on this one. You don't have to just remember the rule, but you can understand where it comes from as well. Let's try something a little bit more ambitious. So here, let's put some numbers before it. So it's 2r to the power 3 times 3r to the power 2. So here we can do the timesing in any order. So if we're going to times the r's, we can do that. If we're going to times the numbers, we can do that. But it's always easier just to do the numbers first. So if we look at the 2 times the 3, then that's much easier to start with. That would make 6. And then we've got r cubed times r squared. And we're using what we learned here, that r cubed times r squared we just add the powers. So that's r to the power 5. So if you want to try and understand this, then try to imagine that between the 2 and the r would be a times, and between the 3 and the r squared would be a times. And remember that timesing can be done in any order. So if I do 2 times r cubed times 3 times r squared, then that's the same as doing 2 times 3 first times r cubed times r squared, because timesing can be done in any order. So the answer won't change, but this is a much easier way to start it off, because 2 times 3 just makes the 6, and then r cubed times r squared makes r to the power 5. The times in between can be dropped because in algebra we don't have time signs. Okay, let's try one more to see on the basics, and then we'll try a couple of harder ones. So here we've got b to the power 7. You can guess what's coming up, but this time divided by b to the power 4. So with timesing we added the powers, so you should not be surprised that with dividing, since times and divide are opposites, then with divide we're going to take away the powers. So the first power is the 7, take away the second power is 4, so 7 take away 4 is 3, b to the power 3. And again, there's some rationale behind it. If you just think of what you thought of in the first one, x squared is x times x. Well, b to the power 7 is b times b times b 7 times. And when you divide anything by itself, then it cancels out. So 4 of the b's would cancel, and you just be left with 3 b's. Now, if those are the simple rules, let's try to just keep them in the corner here, and let's try to apply them to something a bit more realistic to what you might get in, I wouldn't say an A-level exam paper, but it might just be something that you're working on in an A-level exam paper, but it's just a basic skill you need to be able to do that question. So 6x to the power 5 divided by 3x to the power 3. Let's try that. So the best way to do these kind of questions, if we look at what we did for divide is easiest when there's a line in between, a divide line. So let's first of all change the question so that it looks a bit more similar to the examples that we did. And this is exactly what you do if you came across this in an exam. Just change the question to something that's more familiar. And then the numbers you can handle separately. 6 divided by 3. Probably easiest just to divide them here. 6 divided by 3 makes 2. But you can also cancel them down. So both can be divided by 3. So that would be 2 on the top, 1 on the bottom. This technique's better if the numbers aren't so easy as we had here. So it could have been something like 15 over 4 or something like that. So now 6 divided by 3 is the same as 2 divided by 1, and that is exactly 2. So we can just write 2. And then for the x, we've got the law we learned here. When you're dividing, then you take away the powers. So here we're dividing x to the power 5 divided by x to the power 3. Let's take away the powers. That would be x to the power 2. And if you're pretty good with that, then let's try another one. So this one is the first one that you've seen where brackets come in. So brackets are a little bit harder to remember. Very, very easy to do, but just a little bit harder to remember. So let's put some powers in. Let's say it's a to the power 3, and then that's squared, times by 2a to the power 2 as well. So with the brackets, let's just go back to the basic example. So let's try and learn this. So with the brackets, what you have to remember is that you simply times the outside power with whatever is on the inside in terms of the powers. So you've got a to the power 3, and then you've got the 2 power on the outside. So let's times the 3 by the 2, and that would be a to the power 6. So that's the one to remember with the powers. So let's try it here. We've got a to the power 3 squared, so that's going to be a to the power 6 times by 2a squared. We haven't done anything yet to the 2a squared. We'll do that in the next step. So in the next step, we think, well, hold on, I've got the same base like I had before. X was the same base, R was the same base. So here I've got 8 and the same base a bit later on. Remember, a to the power 6 is just like an invisible 1 here, so that's 1a to the power 6. So I can do the numbers like I did before. 2 times 3 made 6. So here 1 times 2, that would just be 2. And then a to the power 6 times a to the power 2, you'd add the powers like we did before. So that would be a to the power 8. Okay, good. And then just one last tricky one to see if I can catch you out on particularly the brackets. They are quite difficult sometimes to remember which rule to apply and when. So let's say we had 3x to the power 2, and that was in brackets, and we're dividing by x to the power 4. So 3x to the power 2, in brackets, let's go to the power 3, dividing by x to the power 4. So how do we deal with this one? If you take a look at the brackets, you've got this power 3 has to apply to everything inside the bracket. So it applies to the 3, and it would apply to the x squared. So when you apply it to the 3, then 3 to the power 3 just becomes 27. You can check that on your calculator. And then when you apply this power 3 to the x squared, you have to remember this rule here that we did. So you times the powers, so that would be x to the power 6. So just take that extra step to think to yourself, okay, this power has to be applied to everything in the brackets. Here I only had one thing, which was the a cubed. That's why this one was so easy. But here, because of the 3, you've got to remember to apply the power 3 to this 3 as well. Okay, and now we've applied it, then that means that power has been applied and that is no longer needed to be written separately. And then let's carry on with the question. I've got divided by x to the power 4. So here we can just do the technique from before. Let's write the division using the divide line. And 27 on the top, there's no number on the bottom to cancel it off with. So even if it was a 1 there, it wouldn't really help. So 27 over 1 still stays as 27. Then finally, the x to the power 6 divided by x to the power 4 should be easy enough for you now. You just take away the 2 powers, and that's 27x squared. Join me for more on this chapter. We've just started today, but we'll do quite a few more lessons on simplifying algebra. Join me again in the next lesson. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.